Okay, so back into Photoshop. So now you should have the two layers that are up here. Both of these are smart objects. And again, if you turn one on and off, you'll see that you get the same problem. The image actually moves. Is everybody good so far? Have I lost anybody? John? Yeah, you're good. Just drag the mask down to the trash. And do the same thing on the other one. Okay, so now we need to turn these things into normal objects, normal layers. They will no longer be smart objects, but again, the thing that I'm going to do right now to get these things fixed is destructive. So to do this, we're going to pick the very top one first. So the top one is selective and it's active. Come up to the layer menu and come down to smart objects, down to rasterize. So look up at my menu up here, up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, down to rasterize. And you'll see what happens is that little icon in the corner that said that this was a smart object goes away. You can now paint on this image. So for instance, if you were to hit the B key and grab a paintbrush, you'll see that you can actually paint on this guy. I don't want you to paint on it, but you could. Command Z to undo that. We need to also rasterize the one that's underneath it. Now you can see when I pick the one that's underneath it, it still is a smart object because I've got that little icon in the corner. If I come over with my paintbrush and try to paint on it, I can't do it because, and again, a smart object is protecting this. So again, what I need to do is destructive, so I need to turn this into a normal layer. So it's the same move, up to the layer menu, down to smart object, down to rasterize. And say, so these two now are no longer protected. They are not smart objects. You can clone on these guys, you can paint on these guys, you can destroy these guys, which is what we're going to sort of do right now. So our next move is you need to select both of them at the same time. So I've got the bottom layer is highlighted. If you hold down the Shift key and click on the top layer, you can see both of these now are selected. You do not want any of your other layers selected, just these top two. Is everybody good on this? Then you come over to the Edit menu and you come down to Auto Align Layers. This will not be available to you if you are trying to work on smart objects. It'll only be available on these rasterized versions. Go ahead and say OK to that. A dialog box will open up and say, do you want to auto-align these layers? And you say, yes, I do. You have a number of different options for doing it. Auto is the first one you want to try. And for a misalignment as small as Claire's is, this will be the best one for us. And say OK. You'll notice now that it actually goes through this. Now when you turn the top layer on and off, nothing moves. It's actually aligned both of those layers. Is this working for you guys? Oh, you're right. She actually then moved the table when she put all the shit on it. But the room is not moving. So look at the windows, look at the counters. None of that stuff is actually moving. You'll also notice if you've got the top layer on, turn off the bottom layer. No, it doesn't really matter. If you look up here at the very corner, you'll see what I mean by destructive. So I'm on my very top layer here. I'm going to simply zoom into this. It has actually rotated the image. You can see there's transparent pixels that are up here at the top. It's actually rotated the image and rescaled it in order to make it match, but it matches pretty flawlessly. Wouldn't that have been nice to have known that before you did all that work? Yeah, because then now you just throw your layer masks on and it all falls in perfectly into place. Are there questions about this? Are we good on this? All right, you can close that guy up. You don't need to save that. I want you to open Liz's now, the one with the cutest dogs in the world.
It won't let us.
Well, then just watch mine. Hopefully it'll let me open mine. That's bizarre. Okay, so you remember what Liz said, that one of the issues that she had in here was a mismatch of color. You can see the really sort of blue area that's over here and the not so blue area over here. So I cannot remember, to be honest with you, in this class, have we gone through adjustment layers in this class? Putting on curves, that kind of stuff? We have gone through that, right? Can you tell I'm in my 7th week of doing 4 classes at a time, I'm in the middle of a monster retouching project and like burnt out. Okay, so let me see if I can do something to make this. I want all of you guys to have access to this image, so let me try something here really quick. Okay, I just put a file on the server called toss. Can you guys see if you can copy that to your desktop and then open that in Photoshop? Did that work? Okay. So it's not in the Dropbox. It's in the server next to the Dropbox. Just called toss.
No,
It's
like
the.
I can't get access. Oh, I can't.
It's not in the
access that
Dropbox.
project.
It's the layer before. It's the level before Dropbox. It's next to what Dropbox is in. Copy that to your desktop and open it up in Photoshop. No, no, this doesn't matter right now. I just flattened it to make it small. Liz had done a perfect job with it. That wasn't the issue here. Okay, so has everybody got this up? Are we good? All right, let me redock mine so my screen looks a little bit more like yours looks. Okay, so you can see the problem that she's got is things are kind of blue over here, and then things are sort of warm over here. There's a mismatch that's actually happening here. So to fix this, what I typically do is this. Now, you can do this with color sampler points. If you want to use color sampler points, they're the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th tool down. It looks like an eyedropper, but if you click on that dropout menu, you will actually get the eyedropper tool, the 3D material eyedropper tool, the 3D color sampler tool. Do you guys all see that? You need to click on the 3D color sampler tool. When that comes open, I want you to come over here to this part of your image that's really blue. So get up in the top corner because, again, if you do something that's really close to the dog, it's not anywhere near as blue as the stuff is in the top corner. What we need to do is pick the space that we feel like needs the most correction and click once. When you do that, it'll throw down a color readout here in your info palette. You need to make sure that the sample size in your info palette does not say point sample, but says 3x3 average. So at any rate, we're getting a readout right here, and you see this readout that I'm getting. Your numbers will be slightly different, but they should be close to this. I'm getting a red 167, a green 201, and a blue 221. That's what I'm getting. Again, you should have something close here. That is actually the color value that's sitting right here at this point. Does that make sense? If you click open your foreground color picker and go right after that very same point again and click on it, you'll see that it puts that color right here. It's the new color in your color picker right here. And again, it's very close to those readout, the numbers right here, because I didn't click exactly on that very same spot. All these numbers do is define this color of blue. That's all they're doing. So I'm going to cancel out of that. We don't need to actually do anything in here. But I need to set another point down here. And so I'm going to go to the other side. Well, actually, Liz, when you're thinking about this, was your other side of the screen, did you feel like this part over here was a little too warm? So the stuff in the middle was kind of the best place. So I want you guys to click on the thing right in the middle. And what you'll see here in the middle is you'll get a number 2 sampler color point now. So I've got 2 sets of values here. I've got a number 1 point that's these 167, 201. Again, you should have something that's sort of close to this. And then I've got a correct color. The color that's here in the middle is the right one. And it's a 227, a 229, and a 232. You should be close to that. So does everybody kind of have these 2 points? We good on this? Okay, so and then you come over to your layers palette. At the bottom, I want you to click on, we're going to add an adjustment layer, and we're going to add a curve. and it will open up and it will put a curve on your image, and mine looks like right here. But you'll also see that your numbers now, you've got two sets of numbers, not just one set. What these two sets of numbers are going to represent is what this curve is going to do. So the numbers that are on the left are the original numbers. The numbers that are on the right are going to be the new numbers that are going to be the curve once the curve happens. Now, these numbers are identical right now because we haven't shifted anything on the curve. But if you click somewhere in the middle of your curve over here and start to push it up, you'll actually see that the numbers on the right side, on the left side of here don't change at all. The numbers on the left side do change. Same thing here for your point number 2. The numbers on the left side don't change. The numbers on the right side do change. So if you've done this, I need you to reset your curve so it's back at its default. To do that, you can come over and either grab this point and tear it off, or you can go up to this drop-down menu and go all the way up to the top and simply say default, and that will return the curve to its normal thing. So this is going to be what we're going to try to do with this curve, is we are going to try to make the color of this spot right here the same as this spot right here. And if I can do that, then I will get rid of this blue. This whole thing will be color corrected. Does that make sense what's going to go on? So if we look at our numbers right here, what I'm saying is I want the after numbers of my first point, these right here that I'm showing you right here, to equal the before numbers of my number 2 point. Does that make sense what I'm doing here? Who's not following this? Okay, so it's really pretty simple to do. There is a targeting adjustment tool here in the properties palette. It's the finger, it's the hand with the finger pointed out. I always feel like if I had this and I was designing this icon for Adobe, I would use a different finger. But at any rate, you want to click on that finger because that is the targeting adjustment tool. What you'll see is if you hover over your image right now, you'll see that it's actually laying down a point on your curve. It picks points automatically for you, which just makes this easier to do. So I am going to start with my red channel. So click on this drop-down menu and come into the red channel. Then you need to hover over this blue spot right here, the spot, again, the mistaken spot. And what I'm going to try to do, I'm going to click and drag on this. I'm going to try to get this 167 to be a 227. Does that make sense what the goal is here? So again, using the targeting adjustment tool, I'm going to click on this blue. I'm going to move my image down because I need room to move to the top. If you click and drag up, those numbers will raise. If you click and drag down, those numbers will go in the opposite direction. So you need to click and raise up. And again, what I'm trying to do is to get my readout of that red channel to be 227. So you can see right now, putting this strong of a curve on here, I've got the after numbers of my red value for my number 1 point are equal to the red values of my number 2 point. This 227 is equal to this 227. Don't worry about the whole rest of your image because the whole rest of your image is going to go to hell. Don't worry about that. We'll fix that later. So did that work for everybody? So we're 227 on both points. Click on the drop-down menu and go to the green channel. We're going to do the same thing. The green, I'm going to click on the trouble spot. And what I need to do is this 201 needs to equal a 229. So I'm going to click and drag up until it reads 229. So now this number 2 green point right here, the after number of my green is 229, matches the before number of my 229 on my point number 2. And finally, we're going to do it for the blue channel as well. I need this 221 to equal 232. So again, I'm going to click and drag this guy up till that reads 232. So now you can see all of my after numbers of this point number 1 are equal to the before numbers of my point number 2, which is exactly what we wanted. We want this area over here to be in the same color as this. But unfortunately, my image now is completely, this curve affects the entire image. So I need to change the layer mask on this from white to black. To do it, simply click on the layer mask and make sure you got the little brackets around it. Hit Command I. It will invert that and you will now have a black mask on this guy. You will now see no change at all because the mask is hiding everything that we did. Again, white reveals, black conceals. But now I can work with a paintbrush on this mask. So to do that, hit the B key to get a brush. In your drop-down menu right here, you need to make sure that it is a completely soft brush. So I've set my hardness to 0. To get rid of this fly-out menu, I'm going to click on the word Adobe.
How do you get that big drop-down menu? When I do it, it's just this little thing here.
Yeah, click on this guy again. No, you had the right thing. It's this little drop-down arrow right there. So this is not showing you brushes like you want to actually see these brushes. So click on this, try to click on this guy, get out of that, click on the little wheel up here, and let's do restore default brushes. And say okay to that. And let's click this whole thing and drag to make it bigger. And just click on the general brushes and see what that part says. And then click on that drop-down menu again. Sure, go to legacy brushes. And it's down here. Yeah, just double click on this because it's showing it to us. It's not showing us. Yeah, don't worry about this because the only thing we're really controlling here is the hardness. Okay. So just drag the hardness there. This thing probably needs to be reset. Who knows who's done what into it. Okay, is everybody ready for this? All right, so I've got a brush. Again, to control the size of your brush, I'm going to double click on the hand just so I get this image as large as it can be. To control the size of your brush, you use the bracket keys that are just to the right of the P key. The one that's just to the right of the P key makes your brush smaller. The one that's to the right of that makes it a little bit larger. I'm going to make mine a little bit larger still. Now, I want to be able to get off of my screen so that I can actually paint outside this, although it looks like this image works fine that way. So are you guys okay on this? Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm not going to hit this with a completely 100% opacity brush. I want to be able to control it because what's happening is this area right here needs more correction than the area right next to it. And so as we start to move along in this direction, I actually need to lessen the effect of that. So to do that, I'm going to drop the opacity of this down to about a 50%. And then I'm going to simply make sure that white is my foreground color. Hit your D key first to make sure that your foreground and background colors are defaulted to black and white. Then use the X key if you need to get white as your foreground color. And then working on this layer mask, simply start to paint the blue out. And you can come into this middle of your image right here pretty well. And you'll see that we've still got a pretty solid line right here. You can sort of tell that. If you hold down your Option key and click on the mask itself, it'll show you what it's done. So it's actually put a lighter gray into this. So where the mask is black, none of our curve is happening. Where it is actually this light gray in here, it's actually happening. Half of the correction's happening. If I were to come over to here to this edge again, and I'll just show it to you while I'm working on the mask, and click and paint again, you can see that this has now become almost white here. So the white area is getting the majority of the correction, the gray area is getting half of the correction, and the black area is getting none of the correction. Is that making sense to you guys what's going on? So if you look at your image right here, you can see that actually it fixed part of the problem. It's still a rough, a little bit of a transition right here. So what we would, but you guys get how this whole correction is beginning to work. Does that make sense, everybody? Is anybody unclear about this? Okay, so but in our case, we've got a true gradual correction. So I'm going to show you another trick to actually fix this even better. I need to go ahead and fill this layer mask with black again. So I'm going to come up to the Edit menu, down to Fill. In a drop-down menu, I'm going to say Black. Make sure it's normal blending mode, 100% opacity. Say OK to that, and you'll see you'll have a black mask again. Everybody got that part, right? If you then come over to your tool palette over here, if you come all the way down, it's the one that's right in the middle. Now, it depends on which of these tools is selected. This is the gradient tool. That's the one that I'm actually looking for. However, if you click on this drop-down menu, you will see that this is also where the paint bucket lives. So you may have an icon of a paint bucket instead of a gradient, depending on who is working on your computers last. But what we want to work with is the gradient tool. Does that make sense? Everybody got that? So with the gradient tool selected, if you look at your options that sit up here at the top, you have several options to deal with. The first one we need to do is set the type of gradient, and it's in this drop-down menu right here. If you click on this drop-down menu, you will have some options in here. These are just gradient presets. You want to click on the very first one. The very first one is foreground to background. So that's what we actually want to do. It's not any of the ones next to it. It's the very first one, top left. So it should set this as foreground to background. You can then click again. I click in the area that's up in this top to get the flyout window to go away. There's different types of gradients that you'll have right here. I want to show you what these different types of gradients are. So to do that and not screw with our image, I want you to click on, just add a brand new layer on the top, a blank empty layer on top. So with the gradient tool selected, there are a series of icons. There's 5 icons up here that will show you different gradients. As a matter of fact, do me a favor, turn off all the other layers on there. To really quickly turn every layer off, if you hold down the Option key and simply click on the eyeball of this layer, it'll turn all the rest of them off, just so that things don't get confusing. I want you to be able to see what's really going on here. So with the first one selected, this is actually called a linear gradient. If you come down to the edge of your image, you'll see you've got a little cross. If you click and drag across your image, you'll see it'll drag a line out. If you add the Shift key to that, it will restrict your movement to either a perfect horizontal or a perfect vertical. In our case, because I'm dragging horizontally, it's a perfect horizontal. Let go, and you get a gradient. You're starting with black on one side, because that is the foreground color, going to white on the other side. Gradients overwrite each other. So for instance, if we click on the very top right now and drag down, again holding down the Shift key, you'll get a gradient that goes from the top to the bottom. If you click in the middle of your image and drag to the right, you'll see that the entire left of your image that happened before you started your gradient all went to black. If you click on the top corner, top left-hand corner, and drag on a diagonal, you'll get a gradient that goes in a diagonal. So all of those are examples of linear gradients. If you click on the next little icon at the top, this is a circular gradient. So come here in the middle of your image and click and drag in any direction, and you get a circle. If you hit your X key and you flip your foreground and background colors, now do the same click and drag again, it will invert that, because again, this gradient is always doing foreground to background, and in our case right here, foreground is now white. I'm going to hit the X key to go back to black, drag one more circular gradient. The next gradient over, if you click and drag it, what this is supposed to do is it's supposed to mimic what it would be like if you were to look straight down the center of a cone shape. You're either looking into the cone or you're looking at the tip-top point of the cone. And so that's the illusion that this thing is trying to emulate for you. If you click the next gradient over, it's easiest to see this one if you drag top to bottom. So again, I've clicked now on the 4th one over, and I'm going to click on the top and drag all the way down to the bottom and let go. This is supposed to be a reflected gradient that doesn't show up at all. Try just a much shorter stroke for that, so just click in the middle part right here. So what this is doing is it's going from foreground to background, back to foreground. This is called a reflected gradient. And then finally, the last one over here, if you click and drag this guy, again, this is supposed to be not looking in a cone shape that would be round, but looking in a 4-sided shape that went to sort of like infinity. That's the illusion that it's supposed to be giving you. But in our case, we want to do the linear gradient. So go back to the very first of the curves right here. I mean, not the first of the icons right here. So again, remember this one. If we click and drag across going left to right, it actually makes this image over in this part right here white on this side and dark on the other side. So we are going to use this on our image. So I'm going to throw this layer away. I'm going to turn on my image layers. You can turn on all the image layers by simply clicking and dragging down across all the eyeballs. It'll turn everybody else on. Make sure that you are working in this layer right here. that is our curve on the layer mask that's right here. And then again, with your gradient tool selected, come over to this edge. But now watch what I do on my screen, because you can remember that Liz was saying that once we get into the left side of the image here, that needs a different correction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this only the first half of this image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this side and drag in this direction, but I'm not going to go all the way across, because by the time I get to about where my cursor is right now, I want the gradient shut off. I don't want any more of that curve correction to have happen. I am going to hold down the shift key to get that, and I'm going to let go, and you can actually see that it puts that gradient all the way across. Now, you might look at this and say, well, okay, that looks pretty good, but I think this is too strong. I think that it's too strong of a correction here. You can always go to your opacity slider of this curve and simply drop the opacity slider down to the point that you feel like it works. And then turn the curve on and off, and you can see it does exactly what Liz needed it to do. Are there questions about this? You can build a curve that goes in the other direction. Let's go ahead and do that really quickly. I'm going to turn this guy off so that you don't see it, because I don't want it to pollute my second point readout right here. I'm going to put down 2 more color sampler points. So again, I'm going to go to the color sampler tool. Make sure that it's the sampler tool, not the eyedropper tool. I'm going to pick the far left corner right now. I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to do another point that's right above my number 2. What you'll find in doing this work is it always helps if you can select the problem area first and then a correction area. And the reason I
Under the chair. That's where it was the worst. Yeah.
Oh, down here?
To the far left.
Yeah. We're just going through the mechanics here, though. So,
Oh,
you mean down here?
Yep.
This area? Okay. So if you want to, then Liz says the worst area is actually down here. To change that, you can actually click on your point and reposition it and drag it down here. So, Bridget, how come what?
Am I clicking the wrong one? Oh, yeah, I am.
Okay. So now we've got the same thing going again. Oh, but first off, really, let me show you this again really quickly, just to bring this back up. I'm going to select the first curve that we did. I'm going to bring the opacity all the way back up again. And you can see that's what's happening in here is 2 things. Number 1, we correct the color. But number 2, we're also making the image lighter. If you don't want to make the image lighter, you can actually use blending modes to restrict this. So we haven't gotten into blending modes deep in this class, but we're going to do it right now. If you click on this curve layer to make it active, and you click on this drop-down menu up here, when it says normal, what's happening is that the curve is not only changing the color, and you can see it's here in our properties palette, those different curves here are an indication of the change of color, but you can also see that because we had to push those up, we're also affecting the tone, which would be called the luminosity of this image. We're also making it lighter. So to have it only affect the color and not the tone, not the luminosity, click on this drop-down menu. This is the blending mode, and you come all the way down sort of towards the bottom. And down here at the bottom, you have options, and you can say one of these options is, I only want this curve to change the color. And if you do that and let go, you will see that the dog now is just as dark as it was before, and by turning this thing on and off now, you're only shifting the color. You're not shifting the luminosity or the brightness of this area. Does that make sense to everybody? We good on this? Okay, again, I'm going to turn this off so that I can fix the other side. So it's this area right down here. I've got my number 3 spot down here and my number 4 spot down here. I am going to add another adjustment curve. So curves up here, adjustment. It puts a second one on. Again, I get 2-point readouts right here. I need the first readouts right here, this 198, to equal this 223. So again, I'm going to go after it exactly the same way. On my properties panel, I'm going to click on the targeting adjustment tool. I'm going to use my drop-down menu to come down to the red channel. And I'm going to click on this number 3, the problem point, and I'm going to drag up, and I'm trying to get that red point after to read a 223. So I'm trying to get this after value, this 223 to equal 223 right here. It does. I'm now going to go to my green channel to get this 185 to equal this 224. So again, click on the drop down, grab the green channel, come down here, click and drag up. and just reading my readout. So the 224, so this green now is 224 equals that 224. And then finally, the last thing that I need to do here, this 158 needs to equal a 227. So again, I'm going to click on the blue channel. I'm going to come over here and click on this and drag it up. And I'm just trying to get that blue after to read 227. And it does. So then finally, this is affecting my entire image. I don't want it to affect my entire image. So I'm going to click on this thing and fill. Well, first off, I'm going to do this to show you that same blending mode trick again. Again, this is changing color, but it's also changing tone. It made this whole area of my image way too bright. So before I do any of the, so I'm going to change the blending mode of this guy again from normal down to color. And now you can see that what this curve is doing is it's simply changing the color of this image, but not the tone. I'm going to then click on the layer mask. I'm going to then make it a black layer mask by inverting it, Command I, or up to the edit menu down to fill with black. Then I'm going to hit my gradient tool again. Now you can see in the gradient tool again, when you drag, we're starting with foreground color, going to background color, I hope. So I am not going to click and go straight across the way we did before, because Liz was saying that the worst of the areas is down here in the lower part. So I'm actually going to do a gradient on an angle. So I'm going to click down here and drag it on an angle going up like that. And you can see again, if you hold down your Option key and click on the mask, you can see what it's doing. This area is getting the full effect of the curve. It starts to then taper off in this area through here. It's getting part of the curve, and then by the time I get to the black here, it's getting none of the curve at all. So I'm going to go back and see how this looks with everybody else turned on. This is my new image. So to see what this looks like compared to the very beginning, I need you to come over to your History palette. I need you to click on the flyout menu of your History palette and come down to History Options. In History Options, you want to make sure Automatically Create First Snapshot is on by default, but I want you to also have on here Automatically Create New Snapshot when saving, and also Show New Snapshot dialog by default, and click OK. When you do that now, this little icon that's at the bottom of your History palette will take a snapshot of what your file looks like right now. So we've got all the corrections on in our file right now. They're both happening right here. I'm going to click on Snapshot, and I'm going to call this Color Corrected. And say OK to that. If you then scroll to the top of your History palette, you'll see that I've got several states in mind. I've got a state of what Liz's looked like when I first opened it. You'll only have two icons up here at the top, but I did some file saving, so I've got more. But I've got her first one up here, and you can see if I click on it, I get the real blue color over here and the real warm color down here. But if I come down and click on the color corrected version, it shows me what this image now looks like. Does this make sense to you guys? Okay, I've got one last final thing to do. If you feel like, and I do sort of feel like that there is a little bit of, I need a little bit more of the correction that's happening. I still see a little too much of this yellow at the top. It's not as strong as it was at the bottom, but I've got a little bit up here that I still feel like is there. Hit the B key to get a brush. Make it a really large brush. I can actually get outside of mine. Can you guys get outside of your frame with your brush, or does your brush turn into a cursor when you go outside? Okay, if it turns into a cursor, hit the F key once. It puts you on what we call the pasteboard. When you get on the pasteboard, your cursor will stay, your brush will always stay a brush, even though we're completely outside of the image. We're near the image. So I'm pretty far out on the outside here. Again, I'm going to click on my drop-down menu to make sure that this is a completely soft brush. It is. And then I'm going to simply be working my way from this outside in. I'm going to drop my opacity down even more. I'm going to crank it down to like a 25%, 30%. And then I'm going to simply click and try and paint in just a little bit of area in that top corner, which I just did, and it worked perfectly. If you want to see what my image looks like now, my mask, I'm going to hold down the Option key and click, and you can see that I just brought in this little bit of area right here to sort of fix that. So in this case, I'm working with a gradient on part of it, but I'm also adding, I'm also tweaking it a little bit with a brush. And in this case, I feel like this works out really well. I'm going to add yet again another history snapshot. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to call this color corrected 2. And say OK to that. And then scroll up to the top of my menu. This is what it looked like when I opened it. I'm clicking on my very first state. I'm going to click on the first correction. This is what it looks like. And then I'm going to click on the final correction down here. And this is what it looks like. So finally, to gild the lily here, you might feel like that the boxes in this lower corner right here have a little too much warming on them. So again, if you turn off the curve that's actually doing that, it looks like there's a fireplace going on somewhere outside this corner right here. So the correction is doing a good job up in here, but it's too strong down in here. So I can do the exact same trick that I just did. I'm going to click on the original layer mask that's down at the bottom. I need to remove some of this correction down here. So again, working with the B key, which will be a brush, on the Pasteboard, you can use the space bar to temporarily get the hand to move your image around to get it to the side, because I want to just slowly paint this in. Remember what I need to do here. If you look at my mask is white in this area right here. It's letting all the correction come through. I need to hold some of this back. So you need to hit the X key to paint with black. So I'm going to show you what it looks like on my curve when I paint with it. So I'm just putting this on to pull some of that back. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that so you can actually see this on the image. And then again, I'm just going to work in this area right here, painting with black, and I'm just going to pull a little bit of that glow back. And then I think this looks perfect. So then I'm going to do one more history stamp and call it perfect. And say OK. And then again, scroll to the top of your history palette. Click on how you open this guy, and then click on perfect, and you'll see. Are we good on this? Are there questions about this? Guys, this is how you do color correction in everything for the rest of your life. I know people who go in and try to eyeball color correction. They go in and they would look at this and they'll say, okay, well, that was too red. So they'll say, okay, well, then I need to start painting in some cyan. And then it becomes too cyan, or it's not quite, or it's got too much yellow or whatever. And people will spend hours and hours and hours doing this. If you do it by the numbers, you're just there, and you do it in 5 minutes, and it's just done, and you're over with, and you just move on. The idea that people spend as much time working on their images as you do, to me, seems tragic. Okay, that gets us through that part. If you want to get back then to be able to close this image up, you need to hit the F key again once to go to the black pasteboard, and then the F key a third time. That will get you back to the little stoplights on the top, and you can click on this, and you do not need to save this, guys. You can actually get rid of it. I am going to give you, I need everybody to go to our server again. And I need you, there's a folder on there called Assignments Complete. And I need to find an assignment for you really quickly, so give me just 1 second. Yep, you need to go into the Assignments Complete folder. Inside that folder, there's a Student Files Week 05. Can you guys find that? Inside of that, there is a folder called 2010-0815_ver_urban_02. Can you find that? Inside of that should be 4 files. There should be 2 CR2 files and 2 XMP files. Can you guys find that? If you click on the top CR2 file, hold down the Command key, that's the one just to the left of your space bar. You can click on the second one, and you will have both of the raw files selected, and then simply hit, or just drag them onto Photoshop, or hit Command 0. That's not going to be good. It brought both of mine into camera. Well, it only brought one of mine into Camera Raw. So I'm going to try this again. I'm going to drag mine instead. So again, it didn't work. Do me a favor. We're trying to do this off the server. Drag these 2 files to your desktop. I'm so happy that they've gotten this server so tricked out. So if you get it to your desktop and not doing it off the server, and then you hit Command O, does that work for you guys? Okay, it should bring both of these files into Camera Raw for you. So the first things first is that we need to color correct this, and that's why I bring in both of these, because we need this color target right off the bat. So to color correct this, I'm going to simply zoom into the color target a little bit. You click on the white balance tool. Again, it's the third one over from the top in our Camera Raw. Click on that guy and come over and click on the little gray patch that's right next to the red. These gray patches that run along the bottom, by definition, are neutral. And so what we have just done is we've actually made it neutral. If you hit Command-Z to undo that and just hover over that and look under your histogram, you'll see under your histogram that you've got, in my case, your numbers will be close to this. I've got a 186 red, a 198 green, and a 222 blue. And so what that's telling me is that again, this is supposed to be neutral. By definition, a neutral color in Photoshop has equal amounts of RGB. We've talked about that endlessly in this class. So these are not equal amounts. That's why you get this cast. So you can see I've got more blue than I should have, and you can see there's a blue cast in her skin tone. I've actually also got less red than I should have, which means I've got more cyan. So I've got too much blue and too much cyan, which is why this girl looks the way she looks. So then if you click on this, you will notice that those numbers now are all equal to one another. They're all 201, 201, 201. By definition, this has been color balanced, and you can see her skin tone reflects that. However, I don't want to work on the image of somebody with holding a card in there. So to apply this change to the other image, you come up to the menu right next to the word that says Film Strip at the top of the two thumbnails. You click on this drop-down menu and you say, I want to select all, and you'll see that you have now got the other one has also now, it's now highlighted, it's selected as well. And then come back up to the exact same drop-down menu and you will see you also now have a way to sync your settings. So I'm going to say Sync Settings. And flyout menu will come up, and the only thing we've changed in this guy was the white balance. So there's a lot of other things it's going to sync, but I haven't changed anything else. So I'm fine with this, so I'm going to say OK. And then you'll notice if you simply click on the second image that it has actually been color balanced as well. And this is the only one I want to work with. I don't want to work with anybody else in this. So is everybody good on this part? Okay, so I'm going to say open. In my case, yeah, let's go ahead and open these as smart objects. So I'm going to go ahead and open this as an object. And everybody should have this. So does everybody have this guy open? Are we good on this? Okay. The reason I'm doing this is that for the next compositing that you guys are doing, it's not going to be quite the same as that seamless part where you were shooting everything in register. You may at this stage of the game, and this is actually something that Rosie already was doing, this is what I said was actually going to come into play in this, is that, go ahead. Oh. Yeah. Oh, I pulled them out of this guy. Sorry about that. How the hell did that happen? That should not have removed these things. That should have done a copy. Okay. Okay, so does everybody have this green thing in Photoshop? Except for Max, who's going to be there really quick. Are we all good on this? Okay, so we need to basically isolate this girl because, again, let's say I want to put this. So the whole thing about this is being able to select things that you can then use in your composites. Is that fair game here, what we're going to do? All right, so this is how I'm going to go after this one. Now, different things take different methods. If you make it to my advanced retouching class, I will show you a whole range of ways to do this. But we're going to start out basically just doing the select and mask workspace here to see how it goes. So to do that, come up to the select menu, down to select and mask, because we have worked with select and mask in this class, right? Didn't you guys all do the picture of the profile of the girl on the beach? We're going to do the exact same thing here. So to start with, I'm on the onion skin, and it's the view. That's the first thing you need to check here. So in the view and properties, you would actually check this drop-down menu and make sure that you are on the onion skin. What the onion skin does is it shows you what areas have been selected and what haven't been selected, but it does it in such a way so that you know that there's problem areas. Yep, you're good. I'll show you. So did you have this image in, you're now in Photoshop, right? Okay, up to the select menu, down to select and mask. This screen will open up. You need to check the view and make sure that you are on onion skin. This transparency slider, if you click and drag it all the way in one direction, you will see the background. There isn't a background. It would be transparent. That's why we're seeing transparent. If you go all the way to the other direction, you see just the image. You don't see anything else. What we typically want to is you just to be working somewhere here in the middle at 50%, and you'll see why in just a second. Then there's tools that are on the left-hand side over here. We want to start with the one that's at the very top. This is the quick selection tool. We are in the Select and Max workspace, but these tools are the same ones that exist inside of Photoshop. So you'll see that you get a options menu up here. There's a plus that's actually selected, a minus, and then a size. However, again, I use the bracket keys just to the right of the P key to actually make my brush larger and smaller. So I'm simply clicking on the close bracket guide to make this thing a little bit bigger. However, remember with this tool, you do not want this tool to touch the edge that you're trying to find. So in my case, I'm going to try to select this girl's body. I do not want it to cross the line right here, or it will actually find the edge of my image. So I'm simply got a smaller tool right here. If you want the same brush size that I've got, it's about 200 pixels. You'll notice if you hover your cursor over the word size, you get the scrubby slider, which is another way to control tool size. So if you were to click and drag to the left, your brush size gets smaller. To the right, it gets larger. So I'm going to make mine a little bit smaller, about 170, somewhere in there. I'm going to start, and I'm just going to click right in the middle of this girl's forehead, and you can see what ends up happening. This has now been selected. You see that the image now becomes clearer. This is showing you what has been selected. Then I'm going to simply click into her body and work my way down like this. As I'm getting down closer to her legs, I'm actually going to make my brush slightly smaller and click and drag down her legs again. As I get down near her feet, I'll see how things go down here. That's relatively good. I'm not going to go all the way to the end. I've got to see what other things are happening first. I'm going to come for the other leg now, and I'm going to just, I'm not clicking and dragging. I'm just progressively clicking further parts down. Remember, you do not want that tool to cross what you're trying to actually find. I'm going to go up into her hair now and click on that to see if I can get a little bit more. That one side got a little bit better. I'm going to click on the other side. Again, and I've got a little problem right here. You can see that there's some green in there. We're going to go in and fix that in a second. Then I'm going to hold down the, you can simply click over here on the magnifying glass, but the shortcut to get the magnifying tool whenever you have any tool selected in Photoshop is the space bar and the command key. If you hold both of those down, you get the positive zoom tool. If you add the option key, you get the negative zoom tool, but I want to zoom into this area of her hands because I need to be able to select those. This brush is too big for that, so I need to make it smaller because, again, I can't let this brush touch the lines that I'm trying to get the tool to find. So I'm going to click on her arm. It does a relatively good job of that, except for the space that's between her thumb and her hand, but I'll come back to that. I'm going to go to the other side and do the same thing and click on that arm. It didn't get all of her hand, so I'm going to click on her hand. It grabs the rest of that, and then I'm going to zoom way in. There's a knuckle. It looks like she's got a ring on right here that also did not get selected, so I'm going to click on that to try to grab the ring. It actually does a pretty good job of that. Then I'm going to look at this area that's right up here next to her dress, this part right here. This has got green that should not be in there. So you can try to get this with the quick mask tool. We'll see. To try it, you need to go up to this options palette here and you need to click on the minus slider, because now what we're going to do is subtract this area from that. Then you need to make a really small brush, because this brush that is the minus cannot touch either her dress or her arm. It can't touch either one. Again, this tool, you need it to find the edge. If you touch the edge with the tool, it defeats the whole purpose. So I'm going to click on this and drag down and see what happens. I do not like that. That seems really nasty to me. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. And instead, I'm going to go after these using the Refine Edge tool. So it is the next tool down on the tools on the left-hand side. I'm going to go to the next brush down. The next brush down is the Refine tool. I'm going to make this thing much smaller. You don't want this thing to be any bigger than it needs to be. And with this tool, you need to paint over the entire image that's problematic. So not only am I going to paint on all the green, you need to get to the edges. You need to, this time, you actually need to touch the edges that you want it to know about. So I'm simply going to click on this and drag down and let go. That does a pretty good job of fixing that part right there. I'm going to do the same part for this little edge that's right between right here. It does a pretty good job of that one as well. I'm going to go back to the quick selection tool for an area that is this big and just see if I can get it. So back up to the quick selection tool. Again, I'm going to make the tool a little bit larger to try to get all of this green. I'm going to click once on the top. It did a pretty good job of this, but now these small little areas right here, it's not going to do a good job getting that. So I'm going to go back to my Refine Edge tool, and I'm going to click and drag down here and do the same one on the one at the top. And then finally, I've got a problem that's right over here by this arm. I'm going to click and drag across that to finish that up. And then remember that spot that's right between her hands. I'm going to go back to my quick selection tool and see if this won't get it. Make it a little bit smaller so it doesn't hit that entirely. I'm going to click and drag. It did a reasonably good job. I've still got a little problem that's right down in the corner. So back to the Refine Edge tool and get rid of that little part right there. Then I'm going to go down and check out her feet. It's the last part that we probably need to worry about. So you can see down here that I've got a problem right here where the green shows through her shoes. So again, with the Refine Edge tool selected, I'm going to simply click on the top one. I'm not dragging across all this because I don't want this thing to happen to anything that it doesn't need to try to fix. So I feel like it's gotten those guys pretty well. Again, I'm just clicking once on these areas to get rid of that. However, it does not have the bottom of her feet completely in here, so I'm going to go back to my quick selection tool and see if it can't pick up her feet. I've got the minus quick selection tool selected, so you need to go back to the positive one. I'm trying to add to this, not subtract from it. Click on her big toe. It seems to be doing a reasonably good job. I've lost this whole one edge of her foot over here, so I'm going to go back to my Refine Mask tool and drag across this edge and see if that doesn't get it a little bit better. It's helping. It's not really great here. It's helping somewhat. I'm going to go over to my other side now and look at her other foot over here. Back to the quick selection tool and try to select the rest of this foot. It did a better job of that part right there. So I feel relatively good about this. This may not be quite perfect, but it's certainly a pretty good start. And then finally, I need to go look at her hair. So that's where I've got a problem up here. So with her hair up here, I'm going to zoom back out just a little bit. This is all the Refine Edge tool. So again, click on the Refine Edge. I'm going to make mine a little bit larger. And I'm not going to paint on anywhere that I don't need it. So I don't need it on this top edge. But wherever I'm getting this whole green thing, again, I'm going to paint across all of that and see if this tool won't help fix that. You got that side pretty well. I'm going to click and drag across the other side here. It actually gets that side pretty well as well, in addition. So I'm going to double click on the hand right here. It'll kick me back out. This is basically what I've got going on in this girl. However, I want to check this mask a little bit closer. So to do that, if you come over to your view menu and you click on this drop down menu, you can come down to on white, and it'll show you what this thing looks like if you were to put it on a white background. And I'm specifically concerned about the foot over here, although that seems to be actually done pretty well. This side over here, done pretty well as well. There's a couple of things over here that are a little bit missing, but it looks like it's done pretty well on her body. There's some what we call spill here in her body that we're going to have to fix a little later on. And there's still spill in her hair, but all of this we can fix later on. So I'm feeling like this thing looks reasonably good to me. So in my output here, I'm going to say I want to output this to a new layer with a layer mask. So again, you have options down here. You do not want to do this to a layer mask. You do not want to do this to a new layer. You want to do this to a new layer with layer mask. You don't want to do it to a new document, and you don't want to do it to a new document with layer mask. So pick this new layer with layer mask and say OK to that. And you'll see that it's actually put this girl out on a layer that looks now to be transparent, because again, I've got the one on the bottom is turned off. So I've got a layer, an image right here, and a layer mask. You'll notice that this image is no longer a smart object. That's also what we want because we've got spill that we need to deal with in this. Again, I'm going to double click on the hand to see how good this looks. The girl seems pretty well isolated right here. If you felt like, for some reason, that this foot wasn't completely done, and I feel like this foot right here is not completely done, we did go through the pen tool in this class, didn't we? Didn't we? Did we do the pen tool or not? We were either all the way in or all the way out. No? Okay, well then we're going to try something else in this. So if you hold down, come down to the foot and look at it, because you probably have the same transparency issue that I've got as well. If you hold down the Option key and click on this layer mask, you can see what the problem is right here, that in this mask, in the areas that are dark, it's exactly what I want it to happen. But you see these areas of gray right here? That's what's causing this sort of like semi-transparency of her foot. So if we, again, hold down the Option key and click out of that, you can see that the foot, that there's areas in here that are transparent. You don't see all of the shoe. You don't see all of this right here. And the reason why is, again, it's because of this darkness that's actually on her shoe right here. Does that make sense, everybody? Mm-hmm. Okay, I want you to stay on this part of the mask.
Could we go back for 1 second just to get me out of this?
Yeah, so simply go to the bottom of this guy in here, to Output Settings, and click on that drop-down menu, and come down to New Layer with Layer Mask. That one right there, and then say OK. If you don't have like a check mark, or if you can't see it in there, just simply hit the Return key, and it should do it, and you're good to go.
Thank you.
Okay. So again, and then Liz, what I've done is on the layer mask that it built, I've held down the Option key and I've clicked on this layer mask. So what I need to do on this, guys, is I need to fix this area right here. So if you hit the B key to get a brush, again, I've got a gigantic brush right here. I've got a 2,200 pixel brush, whatever. So I'm going to drop my guy way down. So I'm down to around a 75 pixel brush. I'm going to click on the word Adobe to get that flat menu to go away. You need to check your options up here. Again, it's a soft brush, so 0% hardness. However, in this guy up here, I've got mine still set to a 30% opacity from when I was working on Liz's image. So I've got to change my opacity all the way back up to 100%, 100% flow, and don't worry about the rest of these guys. So hit the D key to default your foreground and background colors to black and white. If black is your foreground color, you need to hit the X key to make it white, because what I need to do is I need to make this area white. Does that make sense, everybody? So I'm going to come in here with a brush, and I'm going to try to paint the line. Don't do this. Just watch. I'm going to try and paint in the lines right here as well as I can, and you can see, well, that just fucked it all up. That sprayed white paint out here into the edge, so I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that, and then I'll say, okay, well, I've got to make it a really hard brush now so that that doesn't happen, so I make it a really hard brush, and then I come down here and I do the same thing, and I go, oh, screwed that up. That didn't work either. Command Z to undo that. Instead, we are going to leverage blending modes of brushes. So I need everybody to do this with me. Come up to the normal blending mode. Now, this is not the blending mode of our layers. This is the blending mode of the brush that's up here in the layers palette. If you've got normal like it is normal right here, if you paint with, again, white is my foreground color. If I paint with white, it paints white, and it paints white everywhere. Command Z to undo that. However, if we change the blending mode, if you click on this drop-down menu, you will see there's a different series of blending modes. And they're divided. There's sections that are dividing this. So in the top group right here is what we call the normal group, although there's nothing normal about dissolve. But basically, normal is where all the tools function the way you normally think they would. The next group down is the darken group, which is darken, multiply, color burn, linear burn. The next group down is lighten group. So these all make things lighter in your image. The next group down is the contrast group. Now, we have used blending modes to build a dodging and burning layer in this class, right? And what the blending modes did was they impacted contrast, right? So again, the soft light layer affected contrast. That's how when we painted with black things, it made things darker. When we painted with light things, it made things lighter. If you're making black things blacker and light things lighter, you actually are boosting the contrast. Does that make sense? However, the blending mode in a brush does this, and it's the best thing about this tool right now for us, is that if we change the blending mode of this brush to overlay, what will happen is that I'm going to be painting with white right now. Anything in this image that is 50% gray or lighter, it will impact. Anything that is 50% gray or darker, it won't touch. So I've got white is my foreground color selected. It's a blending mode of overlay, 100% opacity, 100% flow. Come into this black area right here and click and paint. And you will see nothing happens because this area of my image is darker than 50%, so nothing happens to it. However, this area over here, if you come over here and simply click and drag through this, you clean up all of that part. It still maintains the knockout part of it, and then you can see right down here in this lower part, that's also a part of her shoe. It didn't go completely white down there. You can hit it again, and it will go white. So I'm simply cleaning these areas up. I'm going to go to this side of the brush here and do the same thing to pop those out. There's a little bit of roughness down here on the ground. If you hit the X key to go to black, you can then click and drag across here and it will clean up the black area that's underneath this shoe. So again, I'm going to fix this area that's up in here. It's these other small little areas up in here. X key to go back to white to finish cleaning that part out, to clean this part out, clean that part out. That seems pretty good. The X key to go back to black to sort of sharpen up that line. I think that this is a little bit of background right there. I think it's a little background on the other side right there. I just hit that twice. I'm going to go look at the other shoe over here. Again, there's a little background that I need to get rid of. And then I'm going to hit the X key to go to white and open up the rest of these that are actually should be. So again, I'm trying to make my layer mask white where it should be white and dark where it should be dark. So that part has actually worked out pretty well. You can see that there's a little problem right along the edge of her leg here as well. So this is how you would go in and clean up a mask manually. Does this make sense to everybody? You can see that there's a problem right here. So I'm just cleaning all of that part up. And we're going to run out of time, so I'm going to move on. So I would finish cleaning the whole rest of my mask. To see the image again, simply click on the image again. Now, I want you to select the very bottom layer. We're going to see how good of a job of a mask we actually made. I'm going to select my bottom layer right here because what I want to do is I want to put a white layer in between this background and what I'm working on right up here. So to do that, select the very bottom layer, the background layer, click on the Add Empty Layer. It adds an empty layer for us right here. We need to fill that with white. So again, the keyboard shortcut for that, because white is my background color, is Command-Delete. If you can't remember that, simply go up to the Edit menu, down to Fill, and in the drop-down menu, say Fill with White, and say OK. Then I'm going to double-click on the hand, and you can see we've got a pretty good knockout, except for what we call spill. You can see this green color that's still in this part right here. This is problematic for us. So again, part of this is a problem with my mask. So again, if you hold down the Option key and click on this and look at it, you can see that there's areas in here that are muddy, that in our mask didn't really get totally cleaned out. You can still use your overlay brush on this. So if I'm going to go after it just to clean it up a little bit. So I'm going to hit the B key to get an overlay brush. I am going to select the blending mode to overlay. In this case, whatever, I need this part to be black, because what's happening is that this gray area right here is showing it's showing the green area of my background through. However, I'm nervous about this because if I use the overlay brush, it may just smack the hell out of this. So I'm gonna cheat. I'm going to actually drop the opacity of my overlay brush down, and I'm going to kick it all the way down to about a 30%. I'm also going to make sure it's a really soft brush because this is sort of like, this is no man's land that we're working in here, guys. And I'll show you what it does, and then we'll look at it, what it does on the image. So I'm going to come into just this area right here. Again, I need this to be dark. I need this area to be hidden. So I've got to hit X. I've got to be painting with black, an overlay blending mode, a 30% opacity, and then I'm simply going to swipe through this area once. And I come down through that, and you can see it cleaned a little bit of that out. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that so you can watch what it happens in real time. So this is being able to see our image right now. However, you need to be working on the mask, not working on your pixel layer, but working on the mask. So with the brackets around the mask, I'm going to come over in this area again, and I'm going to click and drag down through, and you can see it cleaned some of that out. I'm going to hit it a second time, then I'm going to come up into this area up in here, and I'm going to clean those out a little bit. I'm not going to hit this any harder. There's a little bit of green still in there, but I can take care of that. There's a lot of green on the other side, but I can fix all of that as well. So is this sort of making sense, what I'm doing here, guys? Are we good on this? So again, I'm sort of eyeballing this. Again, the brush would need to be much. This is again an edge problem going there with a harder overlay brush. But you guys get where we're going with all of this, right? And we're looking at a most extreme case right here because we're putting this girl on white. Are we good on this? Okay, but now the last thing we need to do is fix the spill. This is a destructive move. So you cannot be doing this on your virgin copy. The virgin copy is a smart object though, so you wouldn't be able to do this on your virgin copy. But I need everybody to do this with me, please. Select the image content now, not the mask, but the image content. We're going to do one more change of blending modes for this brush. Instead of overlay, we are going to change it to color. So when you do color, what's going to happen now is that the luminosity of the image will not change. Simply the color will change. And to see a really good, strong example of that, what I want you to do is click on the foreground color picker. It'll open up the foreground color picker, and I want you to click on the red of her lips. It'll put in a really bright red color here, and say OK to that. Then with your brush set to color blending mode, bring your opacity all the way back up again to 100%. We are going to then be working on the pixel layer here, not the mask, but the pixel layer. Simply click and paint over this girl's eye. And what you can see is happening is this. It's changing the color, but the luminosity, which is the detail of this, remains intact. So it is only changing the color. Unlike, I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that, if you changed your blending mode back to normal for this brush and painted with red, you would simply paint red all over her face, which looks kind of cool, but never mind. Command Z to undo that. Change your blending mode back to color. And then we can do this again. Click on your foreground color picker to pick a color. I want you to click on a color of this girl's hair. So I just clicked on the sort of darker part that's sort of here in the back, and I'm going to say OK to that. Make sure that your brush is a completely soft brush. I'm going to say OK to that. I'm going to make mine a little bit larger. And then guys, when you're removing spill, you don't want to paint on areas that don't need to be fixed. So for instance, I could paint across this blonde streak here in the front, but there's nothing wrong with that blonde streak. I don't want to do that. I simply want to fix the green that is the problem here. So working from the outside in, I'm going to simply start to paint and to get rid of the spill. then a quick way to resample foreground color with the brush selected is to simply hold down the Option key. You will temporarily get the color picker, and you can pick a different color. So the trick to removing spill smartly is to pick a lot of colors and change it up, because you don't want all of her hair to all be one color. So as I start moving in here into the background, I actually start to resample color a lot and start changing the color. Now, for those of you who don't do a lot of retouching, this may not mean a lot to you, but I have actually had people in my retouching class in tears watching this happen. Swear to God. On the side of her face, where you can see there's that green glow on the side of her face, I'm going to make my brush much smaller. I'm going to sample a color of her skin now, not of her hair, and then I'm going to simply click and drag down through that. And I'm going to do the same thing down here on the bottom. And then finally, I've got a spill problem that's over here. I'm going to just sample that and get rid of that. This is not spill right here. This is where our mask needed to be cleaned up. However, I do have spill that's on her dress right here. So I'm going to again sample the dress and then paint the spill out here. I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger. And I'm going to simply work my way around, and I'm going to fix this girl so that she is completely separated and doesn't have any spill. You'll see that there's other spill on this side of her body here as well, and we get rid of all of that. And if you go through this enough, you will have a perfectly isolated girl with no spill. Does this make sense to everybody? So what you guys are looking at now, if you can command this, is this takes you from being a $9 an hour retoucher to being a $900 an hour retoucher. So what can we do with this now? Well, again, there's a number of things that we can do with this. It'll be the last thing that we actually do here. Let me see if I can find another file for you guys really quickly. I think I can. Yep, go into, again, our assignment complete. Inside of there, there will be a student files week 09. And inside of that will be a tree PSD. Don't try to open it from the server. Copy that to your desktop. The tree background.psd. Bring that to your desktop, and then we're almost done, guys. I've got 4 minutes. And simply double click on it once it's copied over. It will open up into Photoshop. Again, if you come up to if you've got a bunch of like windows like I've got right here and you want to only see Photoshop, come up to the Photoshop menu, come down to Hide Others. It hides everybody else. Now, in your case, because you probably have this set up as tabbed behavior, you probably have this image and then a tab of the other one. Is that how you have it? You need to tear the tabs apart because you need to be able to see both of these images.
Oh, I deleted her. Dang it.
Yeah. So does everybody else have both of these guys separate? So again, if you've got tabs, tear them apart. Then you want to simply come over to the girl image, make her the foreground, make her the image. Then come over to the layer itself, again, not the girl, but the layer where we've done all this work, and click and drag it on top of the trees. Hold down the Shift key and let go. And we've actually now got our first legitimate composite. I'm going to double click on the hand to jump back out. Boom.
What happened to her chest?
Let's focus on the issues here.
Oh, that was an issue.
What's wrong with her chest?
There's a hole in it.
There is?
Yeah.
Oh, then there's a hole in my mask.
Yeah.
So if that happened, hit Command Z to undo it. Go back, look at your mask again, hold down the Command key, the Option key, click on the mask. You see that hole right there? Hit the B key to get a brush. Make sure it's a normal blending mode brush now. 100% white, 100% flow. Hit the X key to be painting with white and simply paint over this. Or hit the L key to get a lasso and simply drag around this and then fill that with white. In my case, I can do Command key shortcut to do it. Command D to deselect and then drag that guy over to the trees. And it should be good.
Wow.
But check this out, guys. Look at the quality of this mask and the spill. Can you spot that? You can? Oh, the spill, yes, but look at that hair.
Oh, yeah, well, the background's busy though.
Well, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just saying, if it was still white.
When you drag her, does that happen?
You have to hold shift before you place it.
I did.
No, it doesn't, but it looks like you've broken the link between your mask and the... Is there a little chain link between the mask and the green background in that layer?
Oh, no, I did.
Yeah, there you go. Is this making sense to you guys? Game changer. Okay, I'm going to show you guys really quick what's in the Dropbox. If you don't see it, I don't have it. And I will see you guys next week.
Our assignment next week
Is to do your 2 composites. One fantastical. We didn't actually get through that. You need to look. There's another. I thought we got through this last week. I'm sure we did. We did the whole fantastical slideshow of composites last week, didn't we? Yes, we did. So yes. So just read the assignment. There's 2 composites. One is designed to make it. You want something that seems real. It looks like you just photographed it, but is a composite. The other one needs to be fantasy. Okay. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. Rosie, I'll try to figure out what's going on, and I'll get in touch with you one way or the other. Here, let me show you really quickly, though, what I've got. So here... So this is what's in the Dropbox, guys. Right here. So you need to make sure you're in here. Are we good? All right.
What? Stay away from me. I just got the call.
Sorry.
Like what we did.
Yeah. So when you look at this,
Mercer, do you want just the final? You want the
Could
PSD
that be real?
or all the ones that we put into
Why
the
not?
composite?
Oh, got it. So real photo and real photo.
yeah. But one
But-
fantasy subject stuff.
What about this?
Here, look. Also look at our website really quick. Sorry, Liz. What'd you say?